Welcome to Reconnect, the podcast dedicated to sharing and defending the good news of Jesus Christ. All religions, except Christianity, require mankind to work to overcome our greatest problem. It is in Christianity alone that we have divine redemption through the person and work of Jesus of Nazareth, who through his life, death, and resurrection defeated sin, death, and the devil forever. Reconnect us, O Lord. Hey everyone, welcome to a very special, controversial episode of Reconnect. As the introduction said, this podcast is dedicated to defending and sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. Good news means gospel. So this episode will actually be more focused on potentially just defending what the gospel biographies actually say about Jesus, who he is, what he did, the historical narrative of his life. And then also looking at what would Jesus say about what we can do and can't do, in particular in the realm of voting. It's that time of year. I got Tony P with me as a guest. Tony, what's your last name officially?
Pietrolungo.
Yeah.
Italiano. Yeah, that's why it's Mr. P.
Mr. P. So I have Mr. P with me here. And we are going to be discussing an article that I found on Facebook written by Sara Benincase, I assume. There will be a link, as usual, to this article at andyrasman.com. Last name is W-R-A-S-M-A-N, so you can find that online. Her article was entitled, "A Gentle Reminder That Jesus Was a Brown Middle Eastern Refugee Who Would Not Have Voted for Donald." So the question then is, would Jesus have voted for Donald or not? I've seen a lot of stuff online where Christians are saying we should not vote for Donald Trump. That's the last thing we should ever do. Have you seen that sort of stuff, Tony?
Oh, of course. Oh, yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Voting for Trump, whether it's the last thing or not voting for him, or the last thing we should ever do.
Or just immoral that Christians shouldn't do it. I mean, this lady is claiming Christians shouldn't do it. What do you think? Well,
the basis of what, right? The basis of, I would assume, what she's seen in his character, right?
Probably.
And I wonder where she would land on, the hashtag Never Trump, hashtag Never Hillary, or the Trump train or Hillary train, or voting for neither. My guess, reading this article, is that she probably leans more towards wanting to vote for Hillary, but we could at least say that she's a never Trumper. And I've seen this all over the news, and I find it interesting because when we boil down kind of the root cause of why they feel this way, I feel like there's a conflict there that they're not dealing with, that she's not dealing with here in this article, as far as character. Yeah,
and so I do know I had a friend actually post on my Facebook page on this thing today, which I'd maybe like to just answer his question at the very end once we've gone through Sarah's article. But his question was basically, do I need to put my moral values aside at this voting booth? And if I do that, how can I, as a husband and father, look my wife and kids in the eye after November, knowing that I abandoned, everything I stand for? And how can my kids look at me with that respect, knowing that I abandoned everything I stand for and everything I've taught them by voting for a guy, which apparently has these really bad moral actions and history in his life. So stuff we're going to think about, but let's just right now think, was with her title, this is how she comes right out of the gate. Jesus was a brown Middle Eastern refugee child of Jews. And then she has parentheses, Islam didn't exist yet. Something I had to point out to a guy who said, well, they weren't radical Islamists, who was born in a stable because there was no room at the inn. We're clear on that, right? That's the origin story of our nation's favorite superhero. So the definition of a refugee, this is not in her article, this is me, I found, a person who has been forced to leave their country in order to escape war, persecution, or natural disaster. Does that fit Jesus?
Here?
Yeah.
No, definitely not. But think about what even with that title, where is she planning on going? What's the point of her message? Just looking at that title, you know what I'm saying? Like, just grasping a big picture real quick. Where do you think she's going with this?
Right. Well, she's obviously connecting it to Trump saying that we shouldn't let certain Islamic refugees into our country. And now saying, well, because Jesus was a refugee, he would let people in. And then by evoking the color of his skin is saying that Trump is racist.
Right, exactly. And then linking it to Jesus, linking it to Christianity. Mm-hmm. So right off the bat, you kind of know where she's going. You know where her bias are going to lie. And so when you look at even just the definition of the word refugee, and already flags are going off.
Yeah,
it kind of makes you think, I wonder what we're going to find in this article.
Right. And I what stood out to me right off from the bat is this is a lady that's writing very authoritatively. She's saying very strongly Jesus would not vote for Trump, especially she says that very clearly about halfway through the article. But I really wonder, he's not even a refugee in Scripture. She's completely off base. And it's funny to me how many people, I've noticed lately using the Jesus card who aren't even Christians, but they're pulling the Jesus card against Christians to try to bend them to do what they would think Jesus would do. And so I just wanted to mention, just defend the historical accuracy of the gospel against this sort of thing, because I'm sure it's getting a lot of views because I saw it on Facebook. She said that he was born in the stable because there was no room in the inn. And I posted a comment to the Facebook page just saying, well, when was he a refugee and how? A person put this answer in reply. They were fleeing to Egypt when he was born, which is why he was born in a stable.
Okay.
Even after the return from Egypt, they were afraid to return to Judea because of the danger of living under Archelaus' reign. So they took refuge in Nazareth. And so this person is very far off base with the Bible. Just a point on what he said. Born in Egypt. He was born in Bethlehem, which was in the area of Israel, which was the promised land for the Jews. He was born... Why was he born in a stable in Bethlehem? Tony? A little quiz for you.
Well, it was a census. A census was taken, and so he wasn't in his homeland because he was following the government's order for the census.
And that census is recorded in Luke chapter 2. And Luke says that they actually left from Nazareth to go to Bethlehem because Mary and Joseph were both of the line of David, and Bethlehem was David's hometown. So they had to go there to report for some reason. Not sure why Nazareth wasn't good enough, but they had to go there to report. Likely Bethlehem was a much larger city than Nazareth as well, so maybe it was more go to the central hub. But it was their hometown, at least in the sense of their family, but they left from Nazareth, so it means they started there. The guy is right. They did flee, because they did flee in a way to Egypt, but they did so with a warning from the Lord, so it was voluntary, their move there. They weren't forced to move there. They weren't attacked to move there. They were warned that Herod was going to kill all the young Jews in the area, so they led. So they left to Egypt. That's not a refugee, right?
In some sense. In some
Okay.
sense, I think, because you're leaving the country because of fear.
But it was at least before the attack, before the command to kill all the young male boys.
Mm-hmm. In the same way, though, I think that if I found out the government was going to kill all little girls, I would definitely leave my town if it was going to happen in my town.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, at that point.
Then it would be, but they left before that command was given because they were warned that it would be given. So in the world sight, they just luckily happened to leave before the command.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't even think that technically should count as a refugee status. But then this guy is claiming that when they came back, they had to take refuge in Nazareth because they were afraid of Herod's son's reign when they returned from Egypt, which was by Archelaus, which is something that Matthew does record. But when they came back from Egypt, that was also under God's guidance. And they were going to settle in Bethlehem, but because of that reign, they chose to go to Nazareth, which is interesting because the Gospels do say they went to Nazareth because that was Mary and Joseph's hometown.
And it was in their country.
Yeah.
In their home country.
So how is this even refugee status when you're living in your hometown? This would be more like, I guess they could say, is she trying to say because they were under Roman rule, they were refugees? Is that what she's saying? Because she never unpacks it. She just says so emphatically, he was a brown Middle Eastern refugee child. We all got that, right? Aren't we all clear on this? Because he was born in a stable.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think it was the latter on that is what it seems like she's referring to here.
So on this one, trying to connect it a little bit. This is interesting. So, plenty of people I've heard have claimed that they'll move to Canada if Trump is elected. That doesn't mean they'll be refugees while in Canada, right? Just because they fear the one who's in authority. So his example, Archelaus wasn't right, so they had to go here instead of here. It's like, no, it's more like, I have choices of where I want to live and be governed. So I'm going to move. Like if I really wanted to, if someone's elected in America and I'm like, I don't like where this is going, and I can find another country that I can legally go to, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm a refugee. Mm-hmm. And again, it was just out of fear. They weren't being forced to. And the other question here, let's suppose this. Let's say Mexico finally took back California, where we live. Mm-hmm. And California came under Mexican control. Would that then mean we are refugees living in California?
If we were forced to flee our country, according to the definition, we'd have to be forced to flee.
So as long as I'm still in California under Mexican rule,
yep,
I would not be a refugee.
I would now be a Mexican.
Yes.
And if I was not fleeing, I would not be a refugee.
Okay, so just so I got that right. So they were not refugees if they were living in the land which was given to the Jews by God under Roman control.
Correct.
So this statement she's making so emphatically is saying,
I think
Jesus was a refugee.
There's a big difference between a Syrian refugee and Jesus.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, do you know much on what's happening? Who are these Syrian refugees? What's going on? What you do know?
I know the basics. You know, the basics are they are living under ISIS, and their government, which they have instituted, is not able to take care of them, which is why this terror group can hold such large swaths of territory within their own country. And it's a shame because what do they do? Are they going to stay there, or are they going to go to another country? And countries have opened their doors to them. And I think of Germany, right? Right off the bat.
Yeah.
And
open border.
They're facing hardships there. And so the question is, how does America?
Who's facing hardships there? You mean in Germany?
Yeah.
Who's facing hardships in Germany?
Both groups are facing hardships in Germany.
What?
Well, let's look at Syrian refugees for a second.
This is important to know why Trump maybe would say we don't need to take these people in.
Right. Well, I mean, they go, and then the question is well, who takes care of them? Who helps support them? And the government is forcing their citizens. Germany is forcing their citizens to foot the bill to take care of these refugees.
Yeah.
And so they're coming and they're expecting certain things because they've been told certain things of what life's going to be like, where you're going to live. You can get certain jobs, and then those don't pan out. And then I've heard stories of, well, why did the culture's so different here? I don't want to raise my kids in this culture, whether it's Germany or any other European power. So they're not exactly receiving what they thought they were going to receive. And then on the other side, you have atrocities done by some of these refugees.
Yeah.
And the question is well, how do we balance a compassion towards this group, but yet still keep our people safe? Because we, in essence, our first priority as a government, any government, is to protect your citizens.
Right. Yes.
First and foremost.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I've gone online and I've seen some of these videos of these refugees. And there are a large number of refugees here which are not women and children. These look like men who are younger than me. Which to me would be able-bodied people that should be fighting for their land. What are they doing there? Why are they there? I've seen videos where there are truckers trying to go between countries in Europe, and there is just hordes of these, quote, refugees that are actually trying to hijack the trucks and trying to get the cargo and all sorts of interesting things like that happening. And I don't see people really talking about that. I don't know why would some people be saying we need to take all these people, especially when you can see stuff like that very clearly.
Yeah. Well, I want to be careful. I don't want to speculate and cast a stereotype on on a group of people who are suffering
because there certainly is persecution.
Yeah,
there
crimes
certainly
against
is people
humanity
being slaughtered and killed.
Definitely, and so to completely turn a blind eye, I think isn't the right solution. But the solution also isn't to turn a blind eye to that there's real danger for your citizens of your country. So,
and what danger would that really be? I mean, is it just like what you said, having to have more taxes to cover stuff?
No.
Or
I'm talking physical danger. Yeah. The fear would be, you have someone radicalized who comes into your country and now has free access to its citizens and to its population, do whatever they, jihad war, whatever they would like to do. But I think Trump, he wants to find good solutions. That's clear, that he wants to find a solution instead of leaving things similar. And I think one of the problems that we as conservatives have is we have great solutions. However, I think a lot of the time the way we communicate, it comes across as arrogant and not caring. And so, the left will come across as, we only care, like this is everything we want to do, but very little solutions that will actually help solve the problem.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I think it was Ben Carson when he was running. I'm pretty sure that's who it was. I heard said like what he thought should have been done immediately was setting up some sort of refugee camp on the borders of Syria and just making sure the people in there are
protecting it
with food and water, and it's kind of like, this is where you get to stay. You don't get to have free reign of any country in the world with free access to healthcare, free access to housing,
but they're gonna stuff. But I think we have the resources to be able to give them basic health.
We do.
Yeah. There, exactly. Yeah. And I think by just the very fact that America is the most generous nation on the planet, that we could have played a huge part in that.
And are we doing stuff like that? Did we help set up camps? Did we help set up a sort of protection border just to at least kind of say, hey, ISIS, you can't spill over any further because we're here at this border. Yeah. We're here at this edge.
Nothing comes to mind off the top of my head.
And wouldn't you think if we did that, we would actually have won over a lot of people in that refugee camp?
It sounds commonsensical there.
It does. I mean, I'm pretty sure that was Ben Carson's answer. I really liked it. I haven't heard what Trump said besides mostly let's protect our borders, like what you were talking about, until we know how to properly vet them.
Debate number 2, he's changed it to extreme vetting is the word he used. Extreme vetting.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's some of that. Why maybe Trump is saying don't bring them in. It's not because he hates them. It's not because they're Muslim per se. It's because, like Tony said, how do you know which one's radicalized, which one's not? She goes on to say, and then he grew up to offer free health care and protest against a colonial occupying power as well as its manipulative local patsies. We get that, right? And I just want to know, when did Jesus ever offer free health care?
Yeah, the idea of comparing Jesus's heavenly miracles to free healthcare, I think it is a little off base there. It's definitely comparing apples to oranges. But then again, it's not to the sense where we don't believe that people should have great healthcare. That's not it at all. But it's the sense where Jesus. I feel like what she's saying is Jesus says free healthcare is a natural right of all human beings.
Right.
And that I simply,
right?
I simply believe that's just not the case. And then protests against colonial occupying power. I mean, it's even more clear. Jesus never did that. I can't think of one time where he protested Rome.
No.
And in fact, actually, in Romans 13, it says the opposite. It says actually, obey your governing authorities. They're there as God's instrument to do good and to uphold justice.
And I don't even know if the Sadducees and Pharisees should count as manipulative local patsies.
Well, they were manipulative.
They were manipulative, but
were they the patsies of the government?
But they weren't they weren't patsies of the government. If anything, they were hoping for the Messiah to overthrow the Romans. They weren't really, but they worked with them to the extent that it was going to not get them slaughtered. But even then, some of the Jews still rallied together to bring up forces. Like the Zealots, for instance, they were all about taking the power back by force from Rome. One of Jesus' disciples, Simon, and this isn't the Simon that later became Peter, but this is Simon the Zealot. So Jesus certainly worked with some of these other groups and organizations. It's very, very fascinating. On the healthcare, I didn't know if she was trying to refer to the early church. So Jesus, I can't think of ever setting up, besides the miracles,
offer free healthcare. Well, I mean, it's specifically referencing Jesus here, right?
It is.
Not the early church. I mean, it doesn't really talk about the early church anywhere throughout this article. It talks about what did she? I quote, nation's favorite superhero.
Yeah. And I guess she's mentioning this because Trump has said he would abolish Obamacare or overturn Obamacare.
Yeah.
And so Obamacare, is Obamacare even free health care?
Not for millions of Americans, not for the middle class.
I don't even know who it is free for. Like I know people.
Well, no, it's free if you make under a certain amount of the poverty level. It's completely free.
Because I know people that I guess they don't get free Obamacare. They have to pay for Obamacare.
Yeah.
And then if they can't afford to pay for Obamacare,
it's a tiered system.
They get fined at the end of the year because they didn't buy Obamacare.
That's true.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
So you get fined at the end of the year for not having health care.
Well, yeah.
And I've heard some of these people could afford health care or have it before Obamacare was instituted. But now if Obamacare, the price that they have to pay has gone up, they can't afford that. But then they get fined anyway. So they're getting fined for not having it when before they used to have it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, where is she coming from? Are liberals actually thinking that Obama has put in free health care or that anyone has?
Well, yeah. I mean, the big three things that Hillary went on the debate last time was that if you're 26 years old or younger, you can stay on your parents' health care insurance.
And hasn't it been that?
It was around that.
A year?
Yeah, it's about that. Yeah,
Oh,
but I remember getting out of college and not really having a high-paying job and thinking to myself, "This is pretty nice," not having to pay for my healthcare. The second thing is pre-existing conditions, so you can't be turned away now,
right?
For pre-existing conditions,
which means insurances have to raise the cost for everyone. Which means it's going to be harder for everyone to get on,
and mostly for the healthy and the wealthy.
Right.
Yeah. And then the third major thing, let's see, what was that? It has to do with. Sorry, I'll think of it. But these are the big three that she said is what's good, is what we need to keep, right?
Okay.
And then what was her solution to it? Do you recall?
No, I didn't see the second one.
Oh, in the debate she said this.
I just saw the highlights. That wasn't on it.
The solution is that we need to pay more.
Oh.
Right? The government needs to step in and somehow take care of the fact that prices are skyrocketing. Really no solution on how to solve it, but just the fact that we need to take care of it.
So prices skyrocket.
That's
so
the problem.
We need to pay more taxes to cover the government.
Interesting,
now paying
right?
For it. And if we don't pay more taxes,
who's paying for it? That's us. We are the government. Right?
And if the government doesn't raise our taxes to cover it, they have to cut something else, or they just print more money. I don't think Jesus lived in fantasy world.
I'm sorry, you said that with such a straight face. That was good.
Yeah, I honestly don't think he did. He did things that people would read and think is fantasy, like, "Hey Peter, they're upset that you're paying taxes to Rome. Go over to that pond. There's a fish with with coins in its mouth to pay." It's like, I mean, Jesus is the only one that can do that. We can't just print money and act like it now has value if it's not backed by anything.
And that's why, some conservatives appreciate Trump's call to open up competition among healthcare insurance groups, right? Because his whole thing about how state lines, you can only pick through 3 companies. Well, how does that make sense, right? You should be able to look at 20 different companies, and that way they'd have to fight each other and lower the prices. Yeah. That's his goal, anyways. That's part of his plan.
Now, what I've heard people on this, like healthcare or providing for the poor, any social services, what I've heard people kind of point then at Christians, why are you complaining about these social programs? Because Jesus said, take care of the orphans, take care of the widows, take care of the poor, take care of the oppressed. So why would we as conservatives be against such governmental programs?
Well, because it's the government instituting it, right? It's the government's coming up with the idea. This is what's good. This is how things should be.
Yeah.
Well, who's to say that you have the right answer? And in fact, if we look at charities, if we look at what the church has done, initially in the founding of America, that was kind of the idea of who would take care of each other. Jesus said it. You take care of your family members.
Right.
You take care of the widows. It comes onto you to personally fulfill his good works.
And when I think with that one too, it comes on to us to take care of the people in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our churches.
Mm-hmm.
These are people that are local to us.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of us giving money to a central government, which is
Mm-hmm.
a very long ways away from where our local issues are, it would be a lot more cost effective, a lot more efficient if we were involved as the people.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's some of where we're coming from on this, which is, I think, what the early church did. They gave money to the local churches who
no
then
one
helped
had
people.
any need.
No one had any need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
because they took care of their own and those in their community that they saw hurting on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And now I feel like we've put it to the government to do that,
mm-hmm.
which makes it harder for us, the church, to do it. I think if more money's going to the government, we have less money that we've earned to be able to put towards stuff.
Mm-hmm. And then also, if the government is taking care of it, why, it kind of takes the onus off people from helping others when, the government's going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not that we don't care. It's not that we don't want to help people.
It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the solution.
Yeah.
Like, you have a severed arm. You're not going to put a Band-Aid on it,
mm-hmm.
right? You're going to take care of, you're going to cauterize. You're going to do something to stop the bleeding. But you're not going to put a little Band-Aid there and say, we really love you and we want to take care of you this way.
Yeah.
And that's one reason why I think some Christians are having a hard time voting here, is because what I've heard from some of my friends is that they really believe that God's change through the world or in the world comes through his body, comes through the church, and it will never come through a government. Now, he uses governments for his purpose, but as far as it says by faith, you do good works by faith, and so that happens through the church. Mm. And have you heard the comment that an era of persecution in America might actually fan the flame of the gospel in America?
Oh yeah, I've heard this all the time. I think there could be some truth to it. I mean, I've been praying about that. It always seems as if when the church is persecuted, the gospel does spread. I mean, when the persecution came to the Christians in the first century, what did it end up ultimately doing? Mm-hmm. It sent all the Christians out of Jerusalem throughout the entire Roman Empire. They helped.
Oh, yeah. Paul in Rome.
Yeah, and I've heard of this sort of thing before as well with other countries where Christians ultimately just get sent packing because they have to become refugees, right? And as they spread, or as they actually die, or are taking these beatings, just being mangled, and people look at that and go, wow, they really believe this. They really hold to what this is that they say is true, and maybe there's something to it because they have confidence that they're not going to die, or that they're not going to have eternal death when they die, that there's more after this life. So I think it's certainly possible. So what are you thinking on that then? That some Christians are saying don't vote because we don't need to be involved in the government. Instead, just be a part of the kingdom of God. And then if all hell breaks loose because someone gets in office that is completely opposed to the First Amendment right of freedom of speech,
they say it's not going to change the church. That won't change the church and the mission and the focus. And
I've heard that too.
Yeah,
that is the argument. Okay, got you. So yeah, I have seen that where they say it doesn't matter who's in office because the gospel will always prevail,
and we'll continue to be good citizens and live Christ-like. Now, I'm not there. I think that it's a privilege to live in a country where we actually have the responsibility to vote.
Yeah,
it's not a duty. I mean, they don't force us, so it is a responsibility. And then back to here. I mean, we're looking at she's attacking Trump's character throughout this whole thing.
Right.
So I'm wondering who she's going to vote for.
Oh yeah.
And why would she? So is she voting for Hillary because she has better character?
It's always hard because that's where I've seen too. Christians are always saying you can't vote for the lesser of two evils. I've heard Christians really say it. So they're saying Trump is evil, and they're saying Hillary's evil. And these Christians saying this are saying it to people on the Trump side that are going, Hillary's committed felons. Hillary's done all sorts of stuff. Mm-hmm. It's very known, public record, throughout her entire public record. This is stuff that she's constantly facing.
And it's normal. Like it's normal to hear things. And people won't even deny that. Hillary supporters won't even deny that she's done these sort of things.
Right. And with Trump, you haven't heard claims that he's a racist until he started running for office. And we just recently really started hearing about the sexual assault stuff after the second debate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's like stuff that if he's been in public, he hasn't been in public office, but he's been in the public media,
Mm-hmm.
or at least the public limelight, for as long as Hillary.
Yeah.
And we haven't heard these accusations, though he would be someone with a lot of money that people would be going after if any of this stuff has been true throughout his entire life.
I would agree that a lot of stuff that is in the media now has been twisted as far as what Trump says, but there's no way that I can support some of the things that he said and some of his actions.
You can't.
Right, exactly.
And I can't actually support a lot of my actions, and I can't support a lot of things I've said,
mm-hmm.
maybe even 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Much less 10 to 12 to 15 years ago.
So I'm curious, you're getting to the heart of it then, right? Why? What's the root cause of voting then? What do you vote on?
Yeah, which is my point. I tell people you can't vote the lesser of two evils. Well, sure, I would actually go that route to some degree, but we're always voting the lesser of two evils. Because if you say, like, who are you holding out for? Mm-hmm. Like, Romney wasn't good enough for these people because he was a Mormon. McCain is actually a liberal, so people didn't vote for him. So it's just kind of like, where are you going to sit?
Mm-hmm.
And it really does seem as if it's like, I've heard Christians even say, we're going to keep getting all these bad, immoral candidates as long as Christians keep voting. If no Christian voted, then the next time God would give us a good candidate.
Interesting.
I've seen a good bit, and I'm like, God is actually smiting us right now because the Christian church is voting for these immoral men. And I'm like, wait, how did you get a special revelation that if no Christian voted, that all of a sudden the next time we would get Mike Huckabee or Cruz or someone? It's just like, it's really out there, I think. But I like where you point at. Do we vote character or do we vote policy? And even then, lesser of two evils, I think, still applies to policies, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's
go pro-choice, pro-life.
Yeah.
Like, which one are you going to go for?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
But it's even way beyond, abortion. I mean, now we're talking about the economy, right? Mm-hmm. We're talking about jobs. Hillary has come out and she's almost openly hostile towards businesses.
Yeah.
Right? Foreign policy. We've already seen Hillary in foreign policy. What else could we look at here? We could look at immigration, porous borders. We touched on that a little bit already. I think, what's another big one? Oh, even Supreme Court justices, right?
Supreme Court justices.
I mean, that's going to, a lot of people will say that, it's just 4 years. 4 years, if she doesn't work out, we can get, there could be a few choices these next 4 years that will be there for the next 40 years.
Yeah.
Right, as far as the Supreme Court justices go.
I haven't looked into this. I've been hearing that whoever the next president is could likely be involved in appointing 4 Supreme Court justices.
So they're definitely going to get one, right?
Right.
Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 of the Constitution says, so that's treaties. Right before that, in Article 2, it talks about that Supreme Court justices are picked by the executive branch with Senate approval. Uh-huh. And so Obama already tried, wouldn't get Senate approval. You're going to wait till the next president. So there's your 9th. But then you have 2 who are over 80 and 1 who's pushing 80.
Yeah.
Right? So in that sense, technically you could have 4.
Yeah.
In the next 4 years.
So has there ever been a president in the last 30 years who's been involved in appointing 4 Supreme Court judges in their time? And I haven't looked that up.
I know there was an attempt. FDR, he wasn't okay with 9 justices. He tried to actually pack the Supreme Court. Oh. He tried to add more Supreme Court justices so we can get more of his New Deal through there. And finally, Congress was like, not going to happen. All right, FDR. In fact, he made the power of the executive branch so large after his fourth term that they passed the 22nd Amendment. Sorry, 2 terms from now on. Yeah. There's a 2-term limit for presidents.
Wow.
After FDR here. So, what are we going to look at? Are we going to look at character? Well, if we look at character, I can't really defend either candidate, right? I can't defend their character. Is it lesser of 2 evils? Well, if I look at the facts and details, I definitely don't think I could be supporting Hillary and her record, right? Trump, yeah, I mean, he said some things that are disgusting, disgraceful.
Right. Yeah.
Lesser of two evils, hard question. But I think if you were to make up a list, I could make a solid point that I would say Trump. Here, how about this? Another part about Trump is if you talk to people who have worked for him,
oh yeah,
you actually hear decent comments. You hear, great guy. He's actually pretty generous. Women have said, I've never felt like he was degrading or anything like that. You don't hear that about people who've worked for Hillary. You don't.
I hate to define people by the color of their skin, but it seems like in the last year or two, the media and some of the things going on have almost forced us to do that with the language being used. But there was it was a black lady who was one of his top business executives that just recently came out and published an open letter about how great it's been working for Trump. It's like, oh, there's a black lady at the top of one of his organizations? Interesting, right? Why hasn't that been said everywhere? Like, I thought this guy was racist and against women, but who's in charge of some of his, some of the arms of his companies? And she pretty much said, I wrote this letter without telling them that I was going to do this. And she said, because I didn't want their approval before I released it, because then it would taint what I wrote. And then they could maybe say this isn't really what I said, or that, it could come across as like Trump paid me to do this or anything like that. So it's very here you go,
Yeah. And that's, once again, I go back to policy, because honestly though, from over the past month, it's so hard to read anything about a character attack on the other person. Like when Trump's camp is attacking Hillary and her character and vice versa, it's just so hard because you just don't know. I mean, and even if you think you do know, well, what's your source and then what's their angle or anything like that. So it's like, okay, it really does make it easier when you focus just on policy and what their goal and vision for America is. And I like that because when talking with families and my family members and students and parents of students, what I find that when you talk about policy, it's much easier to stay kind of calm and not get so wrapped up in emotions. And I think when you're able to stay calm and just talk about policy, you're actually able to have a fruitful discussion. And then also, I mean, honestly, I think the way that people can twist words nowadays, especially stuff that's being recorded, I mean, you could say anything and that could be twisted. Yeah, for sure. So that's kind of where I've been kind of going is more on policy with students, especially after that audio of what Trump said, 10 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. Let's keep going with this because some of it gets into some things that I think have maybe been twisted that he said. This first part isn't still a twisting of things Trump had said. This is still, I think, the author of this article twisting things that the Gospels say. Said that about Jesus, and he died, murdered by conservatives who preached the rule of a police state over compassionate humanity. You understand that's what you learned in church, right? That's what the story is about. Jesus was a lot of things. He was not a conservative. So here's what's interesting. When it comes to Christianity, Judaism, Islam, virtually any religion, what makes a person conservative? Here's a definition of conservative. Holding to traditional attitudes and values and cautious about change or innovation, typically in relation to politics or religion. So in this case, this would be, if you're a conservative person in a religion, that means you are skeptical of changes to the values of that religion, changes to the laws of that religion, changes to the traditional attitudes and interpretations of the text throughout the ages for that religion. So in this sense, was Jesus a conservative? And I would have to say, absolutely. He says not a single letter or dot or iota should be removed from God's law. And that he came not to abolish the law, not to change it, not to make up something new, but to fulfill the law. And so in that sense, he was certainly a conservative. The people he was up against, I think we could argue, were not conservatives. A lot of times we would think they're conservatives because, like the Pharisees, they would be more legalistic, right? So sometimes when we think of someone's legalistic, well, they must be conservative. But what Jesus points out again and again, a lot of their laws actually go against God's law, which means, again, they're changing God's law. Jesus proclaimed God's law, he fulfilled God's law, and he fulfilled prophecy, which would be absolutely holding to what was promised before, not changing. So I think she's just really misguided, and I think it's a misunderstanding sometimes of what conservatism is. Mm-hmm. What do you think on that?
Well, yeah, it's putting 21st century term on first century Judaism is what she's doing right there. And right away you kind of see how she's just pretty much trying to say conservatives are the ones who killed Jesus, right? And they want a police state.
Yeah.
And I don't even think it needs a response, because it is so far off base. And even talking about police state, what is a police state? A police state is when the government is in complete control. Mm-hmm. Well, what do people on the left want to do? They want the government in more control because they feel they have the right answers, right?
If anything, the police state, the Romans, Pontius Pilate, the governor appointed of the area, he was supporting Jesus. It was the Jews who were actually supposedly the quote refugees, according to this lady, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like she's completely twisting scripture. That's one reason I wanted to bring this up, because I do like talking politics, but for the purposes of the podcast, to stick to my theme, I feel like this was a good article to sort of still uphold the gospel, and at least gospel in the sense of the gospel narratives.
Yeah, it's a good point. Well, yeah, it's a great point. And then, and we all know we all had a hand. We all had a hand in Jesus.
We all know Christ at the cross.
Exactly. Yes. And that's the beauty of the message, is Romans 5:8, right? Is that while we are still sinners, Christ died for us.
Absolutely.
And that's why, I honestly, Sarah, like, she's not the enemy. Yeah. You know what I mean? With the clear understanding of Christ's love for her and what Christ called her to do, she wouldn't, be saying these things. Yes. So the real enemy is spirit. It's spiritual.
Which is something I keep reminding myself of during this time as well, because I talk to people. I've posted some things that are very pro-life. That's one reason I'm voting for Trump. I just said it. I'm voting for Trump. One reason I'm voting for Trump is because multiple times on this campaign trail, he has said Planned Parenthood, as long as they perform abortions, needs to be defunded. Then he also says the horrible things, saying, but they do great things for women, right? They've done great things for women, but as long as they perform abortions, and he quotes the 3% myth, that only 3% of their operation is abortion. Again, that's a myth as well. It's a lot more than that. They don't actually provide health care for women. Any good health care. You can get a lot better comprehensive health care in any numerous healthcare clinics around the country, which are more accessible.
I've heard that. Do you know the names of any of them?
I just was doing some looking on this. Let me see if I can pull up
that'd be
something that I had.
Because I had a friend who would use Planned Parenthood for things other than abortion, and it was interesting to hear, some of the services that she got there, because.
Did she share what she got? What
for example, pap smear, and then testing done.
Okay.
And so in that sense, I think that's where conservatives can kind of also maybe throw gas on the fire, because what I think you're trying to say is that we want great health care for women. We want great health care for everyone. It's just that we don't feel like we should be forced to pay for the murdering of a child.
Right.
That's what we're saying here. And so if they do provide services that are helpful, it's not like we're knocking that. In fact, so I like when Trump says something like, we'll keep Planned Parenthood, just get rid of the abortion side of it. Well, that makes sense to me. It makes sense to me to provide this service to people who can't get it, but just get rid of forcing people.
So there's something called federally qualified health centers, FQHCs, and rural health clinics, RHCs. They offer comprehensive women's health care that puts Planned Parenthood to shame. This is coming from alifenews.com. Planned Parenthood, but this is from their article. I'll put this on this podcast episode since I'm mentioning it right now. So reading from this, Planned Parenthood boasts that it served 2.7 million patients last year, but the FQHCs alone served 21.1 million.
Oh, wow.
And there's links to this stuff. I don't know what the link will open to back up their
and they don't do abortions?
No. Well, I don't know if they don't do abortions. I don't think they do. They definitely do, like it says, comprehensive health care. Let's see. There are 665 Planned Parenthood facilities compared to the 13,540 comprehensive women's healthcare clinics. A link on that one, it says MAPS, health clinics nationwide compared to Planned Parenthood centers. So it's a MAPS page, and you can actually click on it and get where all these maps are. There are 20 community health clinics for every Planned Parenthood. So this stuff is online. Planned Parenthood continues to fall off the healthcare map with the reductions in its facility numbers, which is because some states are doing a lot of great stuff stopping their abortions, right? And so when they stop the abortions, what does Planned Parenthood do? Well, we're not going to serve anymore because we can't perform abortions in this state the way we'd like to. Great. Good for you. Glad you're closing. At its height in 1995, there were 938 Planned Parenthood facilities. The 20-year difference is a loss of 271 centers, a 29% decrease. Let me find something else on what Planned Parenthood actually does. It says on this one, okay, so in its most current report, I believe this is referring to the Charlotte Lozier Institute and Alliance Defending Freedom. This is their most recent report. Planned Parenthood lists the following categories for its services it offers: STI/STD testing and treatment, contraception, cancer screening and prevention, other women's health services, abortion, and other services. What the report fails to show compared to Planned Parenthood's own reports from the last several years is that such services as cancer screening, prevention programs, and prenatal services have dropped by half while abortion numbers remain up. It also says breast exams have dropped by 41% in the last several years as well. And by the way, Planned Parenthood provides 0 mammograms. And there's a link for that one too. So it's kind of interesting. It says, while its other services, excluding abortions, continue to drop in 2013-2014, Planned Parenthood reported an excess of revenue over expenses of $127.1 million. This is a revenue increase of $40 million from 2012, with approximately 40% of its profit coming from abortions. And Cecile Richards also brings home a fat sum of $590,000, a salary increase of 40% since 2011. So, I mean, and their argument is these FQHCs, and it says the primary health services they provide are listed and defined in the Public Health Service Act, and this thing has a link to that, including health services related to family medicine, internal medicine, pediatrics, obstetrics or gynecology, diagnostic laboratory and radiologic services, preventive healthcare services such as prenatal and perinatal services, emergency medical services, pharmaceutical services. And the idea is if we take the $500 million that we give to Planned Parenthood and instead give it to these other organizations, it'll be way better for women and families. And so when Trump says, I'm going to defund this, to me, that's a policy thing that anyone that's pro-life can get behind. And so, I don't know. That's just that one really gets me. And I think because he said it so many times on the trail, and because just recently we got a bill before Obama where he actually said, where Obama was given a bill where he could defund Planned Parenthood and he vetoed it, it has me seeing high hopes that we can maybe get a similar bill to President Trump within the first weeks of his office, and we can see if he's going to hold to what he said on the campaign trail and defund Planned Parenthood. And if he doesn't, well, he certainly isn't sticking to his policies and what he said.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Is that with Hillary, you open that door, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get the same Hillary that we've always had, right? You open the door to Trump. I think it's Dennis Prager says this. You open the door to Trump. You're not. You think you know what you're going to get. You're just not sure. But where are you going to take your chances?
And like before the Republican National Convention, I heard that Trump had actually reached out to Cruz and said, "Are you willing, if I'm president, to help advise on the Supreme Court nominees?" Isn't that what we all want? Like, oh, you're going to ask Cruz? I mean, to me, that's like, okay. Now, if he's just saying that to get the Cruz people to vote for him, and he doesn't actually do that.
Well, he actually published a list of who he would of the judges. Yeah, and so conservatives are pretty stoked on the list that he has.
I mean, which is great, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course.
And Pence is a solid pro-life
I know
guy.
people who are strictly voting for Trump, not because they're on the Trump train, strictly because of the Supreme Court decision. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if Trump does things he's not supposed to with executive orders or anything like this, or if he does anything felonious like we've seen the Clintons do,
he will be...
The Republicans will throw his out, right? Because Republicans have principles. I just said it. Republicans have principles.
Well, and because,
they will throw him out. They will impeach their own.
Because the Democrats will go hard after him. Not like how Republicans have been soft on on Obama, like the Iran deal, right? I mean, how many Republicans didn't want that to go through, and yet
the Iran deal is what got Trump to actually run.
I wouldn't doubt it. I don't know the actual point, the pinpoint of him wanting to run, but I mean,
it's I don't know. Fascinating.
How about this one here? I saw this part in here, and it made me immediately think of you. Where she went after the Bible, saying the Bible's been edited and edited and edited, and now it's pretty much a book of fairy tales.
Yeah,
I saw that. Like, Andy's gonna have a field day.
Yeah, that was the next point. Many folks rightly point out that the Bible is an assembly of myths and fables and stories. As you said, supposedly it's been edited and edited and edited. What I love when people point this out, like I was speaking to a Muslim recently. As we all know, Muslims hold to the Quran. But the Quran also says that the prophets in the Old Testament, and even Jesus being a prophet, are speaking the words of Allah. And so the question is, well, why don't they hold to the Bible if the Bible is the words of Allah? If these are Allah's prophets, and they say because the Bible has been corrupted and changed. And you ask Muslims, when did this happen? Right? Where did it happen? How did it happen? And it's so interesting. She is quoting and saying things about Jesus and saying it as fact, but she can't even trust what she's quoting from because it's myth and fable. Right? So isn't she already, I mean, just not even regarding like, is it myth, is it fact? It's like, how can like the Muslims quote parts of the Bible and try to use it against us in some way? And I'm like, no, you're misunderstanding. You're taking that out of context. Let me explain it to you. Okay, I got it. But then it's like, but why did you take that part as truth? But this part about Jesus claiming to be God, you reject. Right? And so, I don't know. Those are issues there. I think we just have to look at it and go, historically, the earliest copies that we have of the New Testament are very, very close to when the originals were written. And throughout the ages from there on, we see no copying errors. And when we trust other historical documents that have way less copies, a further gap between they were originally written and when the first copy emerges, the first copies being incomplete, maybe some of these documents not even being complete, having some of these documents only being 70% accurate with each other or less, and the Bible sitting, most people put like 99% accurate when you compare the copying. It's like, wow, it's really amazing. And even the points which were errored in the copying, I saw this. There was a I forget the guy's name, but he actually is one of the scholars that gets to touch these documents that I'm talking about right now. And
Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah. Dead Sea Scrolls would be the Old Testament.
Yeah. But still the Bible.
Yeah, but still the Bible.
And even been around longer than the New Testament.
Yeah,
right?
and the Dead Sea Scrolls really help us because it's the earliest copy of the Old Testament that we have are contained there. And it is about 800 or 900 years before the next oldest, and the copies are the exact same. So it tells us for 900 years, even though we have a gap, it was fine. So when these Old Testament documents were probably written, the earliest ones maybe 1,500 years before the Dead Sea Scrolls, it kind of helps us trust that, well, likely it's been copied okay, especially since those last 800 to 900 years where the copying was fine. That was when the Jews were completely kicked out of Jerusalem and spread throughout the ends of the world. So if they kept it the copying through that time, all right, I got a good feeling when it was their heyday, they were okay. If that helps at all. This guy had these projections, and he showed how they would mark if there was an error in a line. They would put a dot in the column or off to the side, and then a dot over the word where the error was. So they would even so we even know when they copied it wrong, because we maybe don't have to know which copy the copyist was looking at, right? Because the copyist is copying from other copies, so we may not have the copy the copyist was using, or if we do, we don't know how to connect them. But we know when the copyist recognizes he made an error because they're honest enough to tell us, which I just love. And then when you do compare all the copies together, you say, okay, well, there's an error here, but 90% of the copies don't say that. They say this. So we're going to side with the 90% on this option.
And didn't you say in your seminar last year that the errors have to do mostly with like pronouns or something like that? Like something
like
it actually doesn't change the meaning. It's literally just...
Yeah, like Jesus Christ versus Christ Jesus. Christ means Messiah. So are you calling him Messiah Jesus, or are you calling him Jesus Messiah? And I was joking at one point with some students about that, saying the next time I do a chapel, I may say something like, Jesus Christ the Messiah. Just because I think that'd be awesome. Jesus the Messiah is basically what we're saying if someone did that. Fascinating stuff. Yeah, so she makes this claim. She doesn't back it up whatsoever, right? She just throws it out there. This stuff is fables. It's myth. It's all been edited. Again, who edited it?
And I think for a majority of Americans, they read this and they go, yeah, that's right. Like, Jesus wouldn't. You know, Jesus isn't racist, so it's another kind of blight on Christians for people to believe this and say, yeah, Christians can't believe they're voting for Trump. They are racist and they do, you know, they don't care about anyone else. It's like, oh no, we do care. That's
the point.
You know, it's just that we feel that the solutions that have worked in the past, as far as the economy and foreign policy, will work.
What's traditionally worked, right? Is it a man and a woman being married? Is that what's traditionally worked throughout the ages? Is that usually led to the best families and the best social structure? So she throws the Bible under the bus, but then she says it still matters because there are a lot of believers in here that hold this stuff to be true. And so because of that, she has to remind us again, I'm not sure if Jesus would have voted at all. He probably would have been off somewhere with Doctors Without Borders bringing medicine to the most vulnerable people in the world. And you can donate to them here with a little link. Or perhaps he would have been building homes for Syrian refugee children. Probably would have been doing something wonderful for poor children, is what I'm saying. Unlike Donald Trump, to whom the Lord would have likely had something to say about a camel going through the eye of a needle. I am 100% sure he would not have voted for a guy who talks about impoverished Mexican economic refugees are racist.
Rapists,
sorry.
Rapists.
Yes, rapists.
Yeah.
Trump's the racist. I forgot. Trump's the racist, and somehow he said all Mexican economic refugees are rapists.
Did you have that quote? Because
I do.
I actually didn't. I didn't watch his coming out speech. Last summer, over a year ago. So was it a blanket statement that all Mexicans are rapists?
Let me read it. So here's an excerpt from Donald Trump's presidential announcement. As you said, this is when he mentioned it, right? Mm-hmm. People claim that Donald Trump called all Mexican illegal immigrants rapists and drug dealers. Here's what he actually said. Quote, "When do we beat Mexico at the border? They're laughing at us, at our stupidity. And now they're beating us economically. They are not our friend, believe me. But they're killing us economically. The U.S. has become a dumping ground for everybody else's problems." Well, like the Syrian refugees. "Thank you, it's true, and these are the best and the finest. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists. And some, I assume, are good people. But I speak to border guards, and they tell us what we're getting, and it only makes common sense. It only makes common sense. They're sending us not the right people. It's coming from more than Mexico. It's coming from all over South and Latin America, and it's coming probably from the Middle East. But we don't know, because we have no protection and we have no competence. We don't know what's happening, and it's got to stop, and it's got to stop fast." Not all Mexicans. He mentioned the whole South and Latin America and probably the Middle East.
So notice,
and he also said,
one second. Notice what she said. She says, I quote, "I'm 100% sure that he would not have voted for a guy who talks about how," and here we go, a couple adjectives, "impoverished Mexican economic refugees are rapists." So notice how she adds all this emotional language into it when the actual fact isn't true. Yeah. And that's what so many people are doing. And
again, these people aren't refugees. These aren't Mexican refugees. There's not a war in Mexico. Right? ISIS isn't in Mexico. sending them to the borders, fleeing for their lives. These are people that are just coming here because they want our free stuff.
Yeah, so there's numerous fallacies in that one statement.
Yeah. Here's from a student of mine, my TA. He's who sometimes I send this stuff to. I'm like, hey, find me what Trump actually said on this, and it saves me some time. So my TA, this is his words on it. According to the DHS, out of 40 million immigrants from Mexico, over a half of them are illegal and cause crime. And how are the illegal immigrants refugees?
Wait, that's the Department of Homeland Security saying that.
Yeah.
That'd be great link to get.
Now, here's what's interesting. So he didn't give me a link on that part. He gave me a link to the quote, but the over half of them are illegal. That's the part I believe. I've heard numbers of 20 million. The part that the 20 million are illegal and commit crimes, I'm not sure about. But just if you're here, that means you're constantly committing a crime, right? Because you're illegal. That's like a permanent status. You are constantly breaking the law by being here illegally. So I don't know if he actually meant that and caused crime part, but half of the 40 million immigrants from Mexico are illegal. Also, how are the illegal immigrants refugees when there is no war in Mexico? They're crossing illegally because they know that there is free health care here where they won't pay for a dang thing. Which is interesting because I have a brother-in-law who works as a paramedic. And he says all the time, he's up in Fresno, all the time they get phone calls. And these are people that don't speak English. These are people that don't have any, proper identification. But they have to serve them when they make these 911 calls. Isn't that crazy?
Yes, yeah.
And sometimes he said these people call and they just want Tylenol, just want ibuprofen. And he's like, I rush through traffic with my lights on, risking my life to give you ibuprofen when I probably should have been helping someone. I mean, he has all sorts of crazy stories. And he says when they get there, they're just supposed to help whoever's there. No questions asked. And then who fronts the bill for this sort of thing when they're illegal? Or don't have the money?
Yeah, we do.
We do. So why wouldn't they come here?
Yeah.
And they get in our school systems, and which is public again. It's mind-blowing to me that liberals even support this nonsense.
Yeah. And then they make conservatives seem like they don't care about any immigrant, because we use language that makes us seem like we hate all immigrants.
And you and I have been to Mexico to build homes.
Oh, for sure.
And it was fast.
More than a dozen times.
It was fast, yeah. You and I together have, and probably combined, we've been over 2 dozen times. Because I did it a lot in college. I went down there a lot in college. In the town where we went, it's a group called Baja Christian Ministries. At least the one time we went together. I don't know where else you've been. But Baja Christian Ministries, they have done a lot of work in between the Tecate and Tijuana area, just south of the California border, so it's easy for Americans to get across. My understanding is there was a big El Nino storm, destroyed a lot of homes, displaced a lot of Mexicans, and the government kind of just dumped them on this hillside, which has just dirt in between Tijuana and Tecate along the 2 highway. And most of the homes in that area have been built by Baja Christian Ministries.
Yeah, you can tell because they're all Skittle colors.
They're all the exact same design, and it's just something they constantly been doing for well over a decade now. Because the first time I went was 2004 with them, and they had already been down there a long time before that.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just fascinating to me. So it's kind of like these. When I go over there, I go, these people, they're not crossing the border because they don't have a home. They're not it's like these are law-abiding citizens. They're doing what's right and working hard for their families. They're not illegally coming over.
Believe it or not, I don't know why more conservatives don't say it, but I'm all for immigration. I'm all for immigration. I think what mainstream media has done a great job is anytime you hear the word illegal immigration, it's now just immigration.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm all for immigration. My family immigrated here. That's why I'm here, because of immigration. Yes. It's legal immigration. And that's the tipping point there. Yeah. It's legal immigration.
And so I know some people that came here legally from China well before they had children. So they've now been established here well over 20 years. It took them 12 years to bring the wife's, the mother's brother and sister over here.
Wow.
and they were here fine. Her and they have to be the sponsors, right? So it took 12 years to make this happen, to have everything set in place right financially and everything, to secure them jobs. Her brother's working 2 jobs.
Must be a good country if they're willing to.
Oh yeah,
to go through that.
Yeah, and so since Obamacare's come in place, right? He got fined. Her brother got fined because he didn't have health care. He's working 2 jobs, part-time both, so he doesn't get the health care. He couldn't afford, with Obamacare, it was going to be $400 a month. He couldn't afford that. Yeah. So he got fined at the end of the year with this tax person. He said, yeah, you got to pay this fine because you didn't have this. The Obamacare stuff caused her sister to just go back to China.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that amazing that they worked so hard to get here, and then these policies actually hurt people like this that have jobs, and they're not abusing the system. They're not just walking in, not speaking English, just getting away with whatever at the hospital, and the hospital's having to take care of them, and people like you.
Well, both sides of the aisle now are saying that. I mean, it's collapsing.
Yeah,
and when you're paying that's what you just said. That's $5,000 a year in premiums.
Yeah. That's not even your out of pocket, your
deductible. Not even. That starts over every January 1st. You got $6,000 deductible.
So when you add up like probably how much you're making, like
it's tough.
10% minimum is probably your premium, and then if you have your deductible to meet, like if you actually having problems. Yeah, it's mind blowing. But Jesus certainly not a conservative, according to this lady, would support all these people crossing illegally into America. Apparently. He wouldn't have voted for the guy who talks about grabbing you-know-what. Sexually assaulting women, sexually harassing women, and so on and so forth. I'm pretty sure that Jesus wasn't a slut-shamer, and he wasn't a body shamer. Too busy healing the sick kids with the free health care and such, Plus, he was kind to women. Even women folks denigrated or shunned. He treated them like humans. He stood up for scared, vulnerable people, and he never said a word about men who fall in love with men or women who fall in love with women. That's fascinating. I think he did. That's one I've always heard. Jesus never talked about homosexual marriage. But when he quotes Genesis chapter 3, he's affirming that marriage is between a man and a woman. He's affirming what God established. And that means he's then affirming the traditions that the Jews had and interpreting that all the way up until his day. He was not going against it. And we don't even need to go into like Romans 1 and all this other stuff. But Jesus did speak on it by quoting that, I would think. And I don't think the Jews were siding with the Roman practice of homosexuality then anyways. And he was speaking to Jews at that time. So it's not like he needed to address that issue. What do you think on that take? This maybe is where that buddy of mine kind of was bringing up this question. Maybe this was the thing that, I highly doubt it, but maybe this is the straw that broke the camel's back per se for him. How can I vote for this guy that said such things? That she very blatantly says sexually assaults women.
Well, so what are you going to do? That means you're going to vote for Hillary on what basis? Right. I mean, if that's why you're not voting for him, you can't vote for Hillary then. I'm saying if that's why. Because Hillary defended her husband who did the acts. Yeah. Does that make sense? So but once again.
And she shamed the people that he assaulted, the people he harassed.
So I don't even feel like I need to defend Trump on that. Like, I don't need to. That's
don't
nasty.
It's wrong.
Because if that's the reason why you're not voting for Trump, then you can't logically also vote for Hillary.
But was what he said an admission of sexually assaulting women?
I think that's a moot point. I mean, just
curious, because that's when people are used to saying he's a sexual.
Well, didn't it say that this is what I've done? Like it was kind of like bragging about what I've done, not this is what I can do, but this is what I've done.
Is that what it was? Yeah,
it's sound like it.
I saw one lady actually post this. And I don't know, I probably need to listen to it, but this lady somehow underlined some point in it and said, they let you do whatever you want when you're a billionaire or whatever. So she was trying to underline, they let you do this, which would mean it is
it's still consensual? I don't care. That's still
you don't want to offend it.
What you're still doing is you're using your status to get something that that women are doing. I don't know. You're taking advantage of them pretty much. Yeah. But yeah, I don't defend it. But but how about this? How about this? So anything we've ever said now
projected.
Yeah. Okay. So telling me Hillary's never said that. I'm just saying I don't know if that can be the basis of why you do and don't vote, because if it is, you can't vote for either one. Who are you going to vote for then? And then.
Well, I mean, let's just look at this. I mean, I could probably talk about
real quick though before you go into that. How long ago was that?
That he said this thing?
Yeah.
14 years ago is what I think it was.
Okay. It was like 10 or 11.
10 or 11.
Yeah, okay.
11 years. 14 years was the...
What did his wife say? What did he say? Has he apologized or not? I can't.
He apologized to his wife. He apologized to his family. He apologized to the American people. And he said, this is not who I am now, and it's not who I'll be moving forward. So he's admitted he was wrong. He admitted that he shouldn't say these things. He did not admit to actually doing these things. He's only admitted to having said these things, and what he said was wrong.
Should people take that into account or no? Because what it was so nasty.
Well, I mean, I haven't heard President Hillary, or not President Hillary, but, nominee Hillary apologize for anything she said about the bimbo explosion or whatever, referring to Bill Clinton's people that are accusers. Haven't heard her apologize for lying under oath, being caught for deleting emails which have classified information, that are using a private server, getting money from Islamic countries while still using a private server. I mean, there's a lot there to think that is there something wrong. But if she apologized, would I then say, oh, okay. Like, you don't even get, like, he at least admits it's wrong, right? Does that make a difference to you? If he did say what I said was wrong?
Well, I can't judge the sincerity of his heart, but I've done that very thing to the Lord many times. For God, I can't believe, you're shining light on areas of weakness in my life. I'm so sorry. That's not who I want to be, and that's not who you've made me to be. Yeah. Please forgive me. Yeah. That's the basis of the gospel.
I mean, I really struggle saying what I'm about to say, only because of where I work, what I do. But I used to look at pornography, right? So it's kind of like, is that worse than what he said? Let's say he actually did that stuff. Well, yeah, then that's just absurd, right? But let's say it was just said versus what I've seen, It's like, have we not all, as you're pointing out, fallen short of God's glory? Have we not all done stuff like this? And a thing I'm curious about on it is, this is so difficult. God appointed David. God appointed Solomon. Right? So when David called Bathsheba while her husband was out on the battlefield, if the king sends people to get you while you're bathing with no clothes on, to come to his chambers, it's kind of like, was that in a way him abusing his power, abusing his money, abusing his authority, taking advantage? Why was he up there looking down there on her anyways? God knew David would do all this stuff, and he still appointed him as the holy anointed one of God.
Well, it doesn't. Yeah, that doesn't make it right. But
no, it doesn't make it right. But we're talking about voting.
Yeah.
If we're not allowed to vote for a guy who's done this stuff, God knew in advance that David would do these things, and I think what David blatantly has done is way worse than what we have to speculate that Trump has done. Right? I mean, after impregnating Bathsheba, basically has her husband killed, done in such a way where, he can't be really traced to blame.
Yeah,
lies.
Are you comparing Trump to King David?
I am in the sense, yes, I am. I really am. What I'm saying is, God appointed David.
Yeah,
God chose David, knowing before he even did these things what he would do, and he still appointed him anyways. God, setting it up, allowed Solomon to be king after David. How many concubines and wives did Solomon have? So to blatantly say God would not vote for this person when he appointed and chose David to be king, chose Solomon to be king. Like, you see where I'm going? Like, if we're going to compare apples to oranges in terms of who's the lesser evil, who's the greater evil, in terms of what we know for a fact David did compared to what we are speculating based on hot mic'd audio.
Yeah.
You don't want to comment on that because you don't want to defend Trump, and I don't want to defend him either because it's horrible.
Yeah.
But
well, David had a pure heart, like David's heart was pure. Like God doesn't call us to perfection; He calls us to purity. And I think that moment, at no point I don't even know Trump's like religious leaning.
Yeah, for sure. Well, when it says he had a man,
I get where your logic is going though. Yeah, definitely.
Let's go here. When David finally gets called out for it, what did David do?
Oh yeah, godly sorrow.
It says, I'm wrong. When Trump got called out, what did he say and do? I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. The difference, I have not seen Trump make a confession of faith in Christ. He's just confessed he was wrong, which is not repentance. Repentance is twofold. It's contrition and sorrow for sins while turning to Jesus for forgiveness. So I am not going to take the step to say Trump is Christian. I haven't seen or heard him say anything along those lines that would make me say he's a Christian. But in terms of when David got caught, he confessed. If that's what you're talking about in terms of,
I see your logic. Yeah,
like you
the confession is the confession is what's similar.
And again, this was 11 years ago.
Right.
Not that time heals.
And if his wife can forgive him, right?
Yeah.
If his wife has the power to forgive, But
anyways, Trump.
There's a lot there being brought out.
On a personal note, if you come to me using the Bible, this is the lady back, the author. On a personal note, if you come to me using the Bible as a prop to spew your xenophobia, your racism, your stupidity, your hatred of science and reason, your rage at the existence of poor folks who don't look like you, or your woman-hating bullcrap, I will take it from you and smack you back. Great. I may as well use my childhood indoctrination for some good. It delights me when they look at a queer feminist progressive and think I can't play. I used to win Bible challenges and catechism class all the time. I was raised on this feces. I don't even know what she means, but P.S. I'm sorry, evangelical conservatives. Some Catholics actually do read the Bible. More than one Bible, actually. I know it's weird. I don't know what that means, more than one Bible, actually.
I don't know. Is it the?
But anyway, so
the Apocrypha?
Oh, maybe that's what she's referring to. So the way she wraps her whole thing up reminds me of this Socrates quote: "When the debate is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser. You're a xenophobe. You're a racist. You're a bigot. You're misogynistic." Isn't this what the tactics seem to actually be? Like, based on what Trump actually said, was he being racist? Was he being against all foreigners? With any of the things that we've spoken about, with any of his things he wants to see put in place. It's very interesting stuff, but that's how what he says gets shut down.
Yeah, and twisted. Very easy to twist.
Yeah. Would such attacks be fascism? A governmental system led by a dictator having complete power, forcibly suppressing opposition and criticism, regimenting all industry, commerce, etc., and emphasizing an aggressive nationalism and often racism. So I'm just curious, like, obviously it's not like the liberal movement or whatever is a governmental system led by a dictator, but this thing of forcibly suppressing opposition and criticism by name-calling, if it's not accurate names and labels. Because it does keep people from talking, because you don't want to be labeled a racist, a xenophobe, Islamophobic, anything like that.
Or part of a bag of deplorables.
Ooh, bag of deplorables, that's right.
I definitely think there is, people aren't losing their jobs in America if they're voting for Hillary. People aren't, you know what I'm saying? Or I can't think, has any of Hillary's campaign places been firebombed? Because I know that one of Trump's got firebombed.
Yeah. Just recently.
And when I went to go check out the scene of the Trump rally.
Oh, you were there
in Orange County. Yeah, I just wanted to go check it out,
Because you live there.
Yeah, I rode my bike over there. I just wanted to see what was going on and just witness this firsthand. So I didn't get in those 30,000 people. They only let 8,000 people in. And the darkness there was thick. It was thick. And then, the protest turned violent at the end. And I'm trying to think, why is it that one side, if you don't agree with one side, they're able to attack you and do things to you, but that doesn't happen vice versa.
Right.
Like which side is more power hungry at that point? Or which side is more, I don't know, aggressive?
Yeah. And, it's the side that claims to be tolerant where this sort of thing comes from. And again, I don't want to say this is all people that are Hillary voters, but it's certainly coming from one camp, it seems. Mm-hmm. Even I just saw recently some of the, quote, violence that's occurring by Trumpers, by the Trump supporters at some of his recent rallies. Someone posted something saying, it's actually plants, Democrat plants in there that are encouraging
video.
That
get him to hit you.
That are stirring it up.
Yeah, get him to hit you. Get him so far up that he'll hit you because he'll have it on camera.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing?
Yeah, it is. It is. So I like that you said that though. Being careful not to pin it on all Hillary supporters, or because I don't want it pinned on me that I hate people or that I'm racist or that I'm xenophobic because
like you said,
my political views.
It's different policies on how to approach problems. We just happen to look at it and go, free healthcare isn't free, and overall it costs us all more. Yeah. Free college tuition isn't free. The government being involved in college is actually, when the government gets involved in things that should be in the private sector, the cost of everything goes up.
Look at college. The reason why college tuition is so high is because the government has got involved.
Yeah.
Making money easy for people to go to college. Oh, and the colleges say, oh, everyone's got money. Why don't we jack up our prices? Because the government just keeps giving them money.
Which then makes private institutions harder to compete because they don't have that money coming in that the others have. So they can't.
Well, they get it from their students. They get it from the students who get the money. Yeah, for the federal grants and scholarships.
But that's it, loans.
Yeah, loans, exactly.
That's all. They don't actually get money from the government.
Well, yeah. Because
other
students get it from
other public universities do get money from the government, right? Which isn't just the loans that are given to students, right? Am I right on that? Am I wrong?
Like the UCs and the
Cal they actually get money from the government. So if a private institution is going to compete and they're not getting that money from the government, you're right. The only money the private schools get are students getting federal loans. That's it. Mm-hmm. That's the only money that they get. So there's no way they can compete because it's not a free market.
Right. So it's
a controlled market.
Getting more control and causing more problems.
Which I loved Ben Carson at the Republican National Convention because he cited Saul Alinsky as being one of Hillary's, gurus because she did her master's thesis on this guy, and Carson said this. I had to go look it up to make sure this is true, so I went to Barnes & Noble to find it. Saul Alinsky's book, I forget the exact title. It's like a handbook to being a radical. It's dedicated to Satan. That's who it's dedicated to. And Hillary, the liberal sort of agenda, basically follows Saul Alinsky's stuff verbatim. And overall, it's to basically crash the system and lead to complete government control. And so, as you just indicated, these things give more government control in a lot of areas, which, as you give a little bit of control, you keep giving more, and then as the government has more control, your rights go away, which eventually, if it keeps going, doesn't end well for the people.
Yeah, but the church will be all right, though.
The church will be all right. Yeah. The church will prevail. You can kill our bodies, but you can't kill our soul.
Yeah, our citizenship is in heaven.
Which could be a great place to end it. But I do want to hear how you would respond to this buddy of mine. So here's his full quote: "Who would you have us hold up as deserving or even acceptable as our next leader in November?" I already know your answer on that, Tony. But he goes on: "As a father and husband, I could easily use Trump videos, video clips, divorce records, and treatment of employees, contractors." As case studies in how never to behave. Object lessons in explaining the difference between popularity and success versus taking our vocations as serious outpourings of our faith. I can't imagine trying to teach my family that our faith and values are important, but not important enough to keep me from voting for someone for president. Don't read this as pro-Hillary. Instead, read this as the broken-hearted rant of a husband and father who wants to be able to look his wife and kids in the eye after November, knowing he didn't abandon what he stands for in the voting booth."
So I would first say, if you believe that, then you can't vote for Hillary because the exact same thing you just said about Trump, you could make the exact same case for Hillary. That's the first thing.
Yes, don't vote.
That's the first
for
thing.
one of these two candidates.
If that's why you're not voting, then you can't vote for Hillary. If you want, if you want to look at your family in the eye.
Yeah.
Yeah. The second thing is...
Which is fine to do. If you don't,
Exactly.
if your conscience tells you not to vote, don't vote.
Don't go against your conscience.
Pick someone that your conscience can do. I mean, that's it. So maybe we just have consciences?
Well, but then again, you have to look at it this way. If our vote can actually impact policy that will save lives, children's lives, if our vote will actually impact the safety of the citizens of America, and I'm a citizen of America, secondly, as opposed to then if my vote can actually have an impact, why wouldn't I vote? You know what I mean? If someone is going to be elected that possibly has ties to Alinsky and Satan, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems
Socialism.
Like as long as you're consistent and you're not going against your conscience.
Yeah.
But I think that this vote, I mean, my one faculty member here told me, she said, I'm voting specifically for the Supreme Court justices that will be picked because that has long-term impact.
And these are unelected officials, more or less.
Some say they're the 9 most powerful people in America because they can effectively interpret the Constitution any way they like. Yeah. And right now, there's, I mean, if you count Kennedy, there's 5 justices that practice judicial activism, meaning that they can interpret it any way they want to pass whatever they feel like wants to be passed. They're not elected, and they're there for life. So the fact that they might be 7 to 2 in 4 years. This lady says, I'm going to have my hand in that. I'm not a fan of Trump, but I'm going to have my hand in that.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
well, let's just close with the gospel then. It is through Jesus Christ and his life, death, and resurrection that all your sins are forgiven. All of them. If you've ever said anything like Trump, if you've ever done anything like Trump, if you've ever said anything like Hillary, or done anything like Hillary, or said anything or done anything like Tony or me, or any other of us sinners, deplorables, if you would, know that you're not deplorable. God has redeemed you. He has bought you back. I just learned that the word redeem actually is a word in Greek which means buying back a slave. So we would be slaves. So as Paul says, you're a slave to righteousness or a slave to sin. In Christ, you've been set free from being a slave to sin. And so now it's struggle and live through this difficult, messy world the best you can, following Jesus. So certainly I'll be praying for wisdom. Obviously my friend asking this question, some other things have led me to sort of maybe not be 100%. Let's vote for Trump. Should I look somewhere else? Should I be listening to these other voices? But I do think the policies and the Supreme Court justices and thinking about the freedoms that I do hold now, which if taken, as Tony said, doesn't take away the gospel, doesn't take away eternal life, could even help the church. So I've been praying for that too, whatever comes. But I will vote, and we'll see what happens in November. Any closing words, Tony, you want to leave people?
No, this has been fun, and I appreciate that you're doing this, and actually going to be taking 20 students to the inauguration, in January. And I've had many parents say, oh, but what if this person gets elected? And I say, hey, we live in a great country, and we have a great God. Yeah. So we're going to go and we're going to enjoy ourselves no matter who gets elected. And we're just blessed to be a part of it.
And let me guess, they're asking if Trump gets elected because they're thinking it's going to be dangerous.
I've only heard that once. I've mostly heard the other way.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They think it's going to be dangerous?
From parents. No, from parents saying, are you really going to go if Hillary gets elected?
Gotcha.
I've heard a lot of that. I heard one person say today, but what about safety if Trump gets elected?
Okay, yeah, I think that would be the concern. Well, we're supposed to pray for our elected officials, supposed to pray even for our unelected officials.
Yeah, Romans 13 is good stuff.
And
Paul
says that, and Peter says that. So, guys, God bless you, and just remember it's through Christ and Him alone that we're reconnected into a right relationship with the Lord.
Your mission, if you choose to accept it, Share this episode on all of your social media sites and with your email contacts, people who will benefit from listening to the show. Thank you for listening. Reconnect us, O Lord.